The first time that Thor meets Angela, he gets dominated. I mean, absolutely dominated. And this story, of course, comes out of Original Sin. Now, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with it, and we could probably go back and remaster, the long and short of Original Sin is the Watcher was killed, and there came a point in the story where one of the Watcher's eyes was used to blast out all these secrets to all these different superheroes, where they basically learned things they didn't know before. And with regards to Thor, the only thing he learns is that he has a sister. Also, for those of you guys who are asking, yes, I will make a video running over the history of Angela. But focusing on this, once Thor learns that he has a sister, the first thing he does is he takes off to Asgardia to confront his mom, Freya. Now, one of the things to know is that the reason why it's called Asgardia at this point instead of Asgard is that this came out of a story called Fear Itself, where basically Odin's brother Cole had just kind of gone on a rampage after coming back, and like Juggernaut gets like his own Thor's hammer, so to speak, and it was a wild story. The important thing is that at the end of Fear Itself, Odin went into isolation, went into exile. Freya took over, and where it seemed like Asgard had basically been destroyed, that what ended up happening is that Tony Stark had quote-unquote rebuilt it using repulsor technology. So in essence, this is a rebuilt Asgard. That's really the only thing you need to know. But when Thor shows up here, because Odin's not there, Freya's the one running the show, and he immediately confronts her about the fact that number one, he's learned he has a sister, and number two, she comes from the 10th realm, which no one had known about before. And initially his mom's dismissive, right? That she says, "You are mistaken, son, you have no sister." But the look on her face tells him everything he needs to know, right? That like, she's aware of the fact that he's telling the truth, and she knows he has a sister, but she's trying to pretend that he doesn't. And where he keeps pushing her, right? How, mother, how could you lie to me for my whole life? How can you lie now? How can you tell me that I have no sister? She says it's because I saw her die. And what ends up happening is Freya gives us this throwback, and she says, "You spoke of a fire, of blood, of a war that makes all conflict sense seem like the shadows of a child's game, a war with angels. You caught the smallest glimpse of that war, that it quite literally was a war between the angels of the 10th realm and Asgard itself. And this conflict was intense. Now, Freya doesn't know how it started, which is why you don't get the start of the conflict here. You just kind of see how it ended, because what goes on is that as this war fights over and over and over again, the Queen of the Angels shows up with the daughter of Odin in hand, right? The daughter Aldrif. And she literally tells Odin, "You know how to end this war, Odin One-Eye. You can make all as it was between our people. Your daughter can live beyond this moment if you show wisdom." And it kind of takes Odin by surprise, the fact that like she would go after a child, because it lacks honor. And that's one of the big ideological differences between the angels and Asgardians, right? Honor versus basically currency, capitalism. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we get further through that, because it's not a metaphor. But ultimately, he says the honor of Asgard cannot be bought. And initially Freya tries to talk him down, because Freya knows exactly what's going to happen. And it's exactly what does happen. That literally the queen says, "Honor the Asgardian word for nothing." And she just stabs the child. And so in that moment, Odin lashes out and just fires off a blast that destroys one of the warships of the angels. But right before it happens, the queen tells him, "You made your choice, King of Nothing, and I will hold you to it. I swear by all I own that you will never hold your daughter again, not even in death." And so once this ship is destroyed, Freya continues on, and she says, "The Odin force rose in my husband, bursting forth with his rage and pain, burning the enemy with the fire of molten stars. And it was too late. The Queen of Angels was gone, taking my child's corpse with her. We had nothing even to bury." And she says, "So Odin, in the depths of his fury, tore the 10th realm loose from the others, from the roots of Yggdrasil itself, and sealed it away, hidden from sight and memory, wiped from our legends like a stain. And all that remained was the pain in my heart, the pain I tried to spare you, and I wish you'd known your sister, my son, but your sister is dead." And the response of Thor? No, she lives. And so because of the fact that Freya can't really give him any definitive answers, he basically goes to the only person who can, which is Eichel, right, which is Loki spelled backwards. There is a whole reason why he's called that, and that requires way more of an explanation than we're going to go into here. And so just understand he's a reincarnated version of Loki, for lack of a better word. But that's when Thor kind of reveals everything to him, right, tells him the story and says, like, I have a sister, so on and so forth, recounting everything that Freya had told Thor combined with Thor's vision. And so at the end of the day, Loki's like, well, then there's only one thing to do. We have to go to this place where the 10th realm was, and we have to break into it, and we have to go find your sister, which is exactly what they do. Once they get to this place, though, the 10th realm is not readily available. They can't just go there. But Loki, with all of his magic, realizes that there used to be an access point to the 10th realm out here in the middle of nowhere. And the way he describes it is almost like a callus over an old scar, that it's a door. And he's like, this door, like all doors, can be unlocked. So they literally break this thing down and they enter into the 10th realm. And once they get there, they just find this huge, expansive kingdom. And so at that point, you jump back to Midgard, as we would call it, out in space with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Because at this point, Angela's part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's one of the first things that happened when she showed up in the main Marvel Universe at the end of Age of Ultron. She meets the Guardians of the Galaxy and then joins the Guardians of the Galaxy. Let me know if you guys want me to cover that, because it is kind of a cool point in her character's history. But one of the things that happens here is she feels this kind of shock, right? This kind of impact. And the immediate thing she figures out is that someone has opened the door to the 10th realm. So it's no longer cut off from the other 9 realms that exist out there in the Marvel Universe. And so as Thor and Loki are kind of exploring this place, right, Thor literally says, it's not like I expected, right? To hear Mother talk, I thought that we would find not but evil here, a foundry of war manned by a legion of demons. But this, brother, this seems like a paradise. Now, the reality here, and a lot of you guys who are familiar with Marvel and DC comics are kind of figuring out pretty quickly, this is not that dissimilar from Themyscira, right? It's a place occupied only by women. They're basically warriors of different sorts, but as far as their personalities go and the things they value, they are very different from the Amazons on the island of Themyscira. And so one of the things that happens here is that when Thor arrives, he's immediately confronted by a handful of these angels. And they ask him why he's here, what it is that he wants. They don't really treat him as a friend or a foe. They're a little standoffish, but they're also prepared for a battle if Thor decides to go nuts and attack them. And so what ends up happening is that while Loki's just kind of like, look, I'm a little uncertain about this, Thor's just like, my name's Thor, right? Son of Odin and prince of a land that you may have heard tell of in your history books. It's called Asgard. And they're like, Asgardians, kill them! Right? They immediately start wanting to attack these guys. They're like, use their bloody flesh as bait for the wolves and the crows. And it's just like, holy cow. They immediately attack Thor and Loki. No questions asked. That's how far deep the hatred runs between these two groups. And one of the things that you're going to realize over time is that the angels have actually been conditioned by their queen to hate the Asgardians inside and out. It's what happens when you have a society in isolation and they're constantly bombarded with a particular ideology. Loki, of course, teleports out, right? And literally says, like, I didn't come here to die today. So he ends up bailing out. And then Thor just starts going to an attack against all these guys. Now, what ends up happening is that one of these spies, right, a member of the angels, ends up flying to the queen and fills the queen in on what's going on. And this is when you start to learn the nature of the angels themselves, right? Because the queen asks, you're a messenger bird, are you not, right? The lowest rank of the spy caste. And she says, yes. And so the queen says, then speak your message, child, and speak it quickly, lest it lose its value. And so she basically fills the queen in on what's happening, right? There's intruders, there are 2 Asgardians. One of them is huge and muscular. The other one is smaller and he doesn't really seem capable of fighting, but he seems very, very quick-witted. And so for the information that this woman provides, the queen goes to offer her a blood onyx that she could barter this thing for any number of possibilities, right? Money, she could barter it for increased promotion. It offers all kinds of possibilities here, but she doesn't give it to her. And the reason why is because that girl gave her information freely. And the queen says, if you hadn't given the information for free, you would have this. For your foolishness, you may have a lesson instead. One you should have learned already. The first rule of business, of life itself. Nothing for nothing. And so she tells her, go and prepare a couple of dreadnoughts. We will send them after these Asgardians. And the girl, having learned her lesson, doesn't move anywhere. And when the queen asks her, what are you waiting for? The girl says, payment. So that's just kind of a quick establishing of how this whole group works. but to the point of Angela herself, right? One of the things that happens here is that while Thor is tearing apart all these angels, I mean, literally crushing all these guys, even the dreadnoughts they have, they're not prepared for him, right? Because with Thor's hammer, right, throwing Mjolnir out there, they don't understand the power of it, and it just tears through these dreadnoughts, no questions asked. And so even the queen is kind of caught unawares by the power of Thor, only for Loki to appear and to confront the queen herself. And one of the things that he does is he has this bit of a conversation where he tells her, I could kill you where you stand, right, in this moment right now. But he asks, right, onto the subject of my brother's sister. And the queen says, not your sister. No, of course not. You're no Asgardian. You're no Odin's son either. You are a frost giant. Your race and mine are old allies, cunning one. To you, I can offer a barter. And she says, your safety for my own, unless you think you can slay me and escape alive. And the response of Loki, whereas if I lower my blade, we'll all sit down and have tea and cakes. I'm not quite so green as I dress, your highness, but that's the kicker. The queen doesn't trust Asgardians, and so she says an Asgardian might renege on such a bargain or claim it as an excuse to fight. But you and I, we understand the value of mutual benefit, don't we? And so that's where Loki is like, tea and cakes. And so in that moment, you switch over to the arrival of Angela, because what happens is that while Thor is just standing here addressing all these angels, right, some of which he's killed, and asks the question, right, is this fight over yet? Are we done? Or are you going to show me where my sister is? He's told two things. The first is that they don't know where his sister is. They don't even know that he has a sister. And even if they did, they wouldn't take him to her. And number two, when Angela arrives, he's told, oh great queen, living goddess of us all, it's her, the wingless one, strongest of all hunters, returned in our hour of need. And so Thor turns and asks, like, who are you supposed to be? And she just says, I am vengeance deferred, Asgardian. I am payment in blood for debts past due. I have been long in coming, but now I am here. And if there are gods the son of evil prays to, I suggest you make your peace. And then she says, like, I saw you trespass on earth, and I did not kill you. Let's rectify that error. And she immediately crushes Thor, like goes in for the kill. And like right off the bat, she's faster than he is. She's a more capable fighter than he is. And the other angels want to step in, and her response, no, this guy is mine. And so she says, for the heaven they betrayed and the earth they despoiled, we are owed payment. Payment in his blood, nothing for nothing. And initially Thor looks like he's kind of getting the upper hand, right? Daughter of demons, you will not keep me from my sister, for though my sinews ache and my bones bid fair to crack, Thor fights on to the last breath. And he just like throws his hammer at her and she just dodges out of the way. And that's a crazy thing because at that point, she starts taunting him, right? That breath is coming soon, brute. You may have some small edge in raw strength, but I am faster than your hammer and much faster than you. And so literally grabs him and just flips him over, right? And at that point, Thor's done, right? She just puts the sword up to his neck and it's just like a pig with its throat slit. And I will wear your blood as my caste mark, son of nothing. And almost goes in for the kill. In this moment right now, in the span of like a few seconds, she dominated Thor and literally has him dead to rights. But then she's told to hold off, right? She's told to stay. Now, why is she told to stay? Okay, so while this fight between Thor and Angela is going on, you actually switch over to Loki and the Queen. And what ends up happening is you start getting the backstory to why it is that the angels and Asgardians hate each other so much. And one of the first things you learn when she sits down and starts talking to Loki is she establishes that angels were actually protectors on Earth at one point in time. That the Asgardians as a group were just pretty brutal, right? They would just kind of travel around, they would hunt humans, different things like that, treat humans as sport, so on and so forth. And that what angels would do is they would counter the Asgardians. They would protect humanity from the Asgardians themselves. What's so ironic about that is that in this particular instance, when these handful of Asgardians are chased off or destroyed, that she travels back to a mountain, right? And she says, the Asgardians are spread in pieces on the cold hillside as you requested. Their fellows will think twice before treating Midgard as their playground. Now, On to the matter of payment. The Earth folk have provided a small token of their esteem, as is only proper. We must teach them good habits after all, but the remainder of the debt falls to you, King Odin. And where Loki's taken by surprise at this, the queen says, yes, right, Odin, the king of nothing himself, hired us to protect Earth from his own subjects. Behind closed doors, obviously, he knew he could never admit it, but he also knew what Asgardians are, deep down in their bones, that they'll take any excuse to fight. All of them, driven by their battle lust, their warrior madness, compelled to destroy all they encounter. And so she continues on, because at some point, things go sideways, right? You kind of jump to this conversation between Odin and the queen, where he says this means war. And come to find out, what the queen had been doing was actually working against the Asgardians, uniting all these other realms against the Asgardians, right? Because Odin says, a war greater than any known, a war of realms. Asgard's enemies make ready, from dark Svartalheim to Surtur's pit, from the frozen wastes of Niflheim to Hela's dread domain, from the stench-witted trolls to the rough commoners of Vanaheim. They rise like serpents to destroy us, and you are the cause, Queen of Vipers. You have betrayed us. And she says, why not? Right? Jotunheim paid us handsomely to form a strategy that would defeat you. We suggested an alliance of your enemies. You Asgardians really know how to make them after all, because the reality here is that angels of heaven within Marvel Comics are basically sellswords. At the end of the day, right, they will just go to the highest bidder, no matter who that bidder is. And what's basically happened is that Jotunheim went to them and they were like, we will pay you to kill the Asgardians, and we'll pay you to form a strategy to do it. And it's like, okay, cool, right? So we'll just figure out a way to unite the various realms against Asgard. And that's what pisses Odin off so bad, because in his mind, they had a deal, and deals are bound in honor. But the angels of heaven care nothing about honor. The only thing that matters to them is currency. And that's even what Odin asks, right? What demon lives in that rotted soul that you would take riches over reputation? Have you no loyalty, Queen of Ruin? Have you no honor? And her response here, honor. Yes, I've heard of that word, the precious commodity Asgard pays her soldiers for their sweat and blood and lives. A con trick, a swindle. Your people die for you and you give them nothing. Nothing but this honor that none can count or see or weigh in their hand. Were you planning to pay us with honor, King of Swindlers? Because that would mean war. True war, as only angels may fight it. A war to cost you more than you can dream. And so the response of Odin here is, if you truly cannot weigh honor, then I pity you. 'Tis a jewel without price, and it does not take kindly to threats. You'll have no more coin from Asgard. Bring on your war. I will bury you. And so she continues on in telling the story. And so we went to war, all against all, and all against Asgard. Alliances were made and broken by the hour, and never with the nothing ones. The word was out. Any befriending Asgard made enemies of all angel kind, and none dared to do that. And yes, Odin won his war. He caged us for eons, but I made sure he buried nothing in the end. Not even his beloved daughter. And so that takes Loki by surprise, right? He's just like, you killed a child, right? And the response of the queen, and 1,000 grown-ups, but that you don't mention. Besides, don't tell me that you've never slain innocents to survive, trickster god. So the reality here is that from the perspective of angels, it doesn't really matter who they kill. They're just killing people, right? Whether it's a child or an old person or someone who's 30 years old and the most battle-hardened soldier in the universe, it's all the same as far as they're concerned. And so the two of them work out a deal amongst each other. And that's the crazy thing here, is because when you jump back to that moment when Angela got the upper hand on Thor, she was told to stay her hand because the queen now has a mistress of strategies. And the mistress of strategy says that he's worth more to us alive than he is dead. And even Angela doesn't know what she's talking about. There's no mistress of strategies. And she's like, fine, whatever, right? Let us meet with the great thinker and then hear the fine stratagem that prevents me gutting the Odin son like a fish, and it had better be good. I love Angela in Marvel Comics because at that point, right, we're just kind of told time passes and Thor is basically strung up. And then he's introduced to the mistress of strategies, which is Loki, who's turned himself into a woman, yet again, in Marvel Comics. And of course, that's a crazy thing, is Thor doesn't know if this is Loki operating on his behalf or Loki truly betraying him, because it can go either way. That's the nature of Loki in Marvel Comics, right? Loki just says, look on the bright side, Thor, like you finally have the sister you've been looking for. Right? Thor's like, and a most treacherous one, a cold comfort. But the idea here is that as mistress of strategies, she's going to effectively lead the forces of the angels against the forces of Asgard and lay waste to Asgard itself. And so one of the things the Queen says, right, enough, this is not the time for harsh words. Heaven is once more connected to the world tree. Angela, greatest of all hunters, is returned to us, and the son of Odin is ours to punish. As your queen, I declare this a day of celebration, and you, Loki, my mistress of strategies, shall provide the fireworks. Now, of course, Loki picks up on that to mean, like, basically he's going to lead them against Asgard, right? But the funny thing about this is he starts to realize that the crack in the armor of all of this is Angela herself, because in turn, he starts talking about the idea of her returning home, right? He's like, you know, of course you're glad to be home at last, right? You've got a promotion and a shiny new uniform and the love of your queen. Your exile is done forever. You'll roam across the endless cosmos no more, Hunt Leader. And he's like, how happy that must make you. Because Angela just is kind of left wanting despite it all. And he asks, like, what's the matter, Angela? Have I touched a nerve? And she kind of tells him, you know, don't mock me. She says, I was born wingless, an outcast, yet now I am leader of the hunt. I am a hero to all heaven. I have exchanged my fealty in sacred barter with the royal house. I am bonded, and I will not leave my people again, even for the stars. And so the response of Loki, well, good for you, right? I mean, I mean it. Like, I'm sure your people won't break any sacred oaths either, right? They'll stand with you no matter what happens, probably. And of course, this is Loki kind of under the radar, basically saying your people can't be trusted, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, they value coin and currency above all else. Honor means nothing to them. So they'll be in your corner so long as they have nothing to lose. And so what ends up happening is that Loki leads a member of the Queen's army directly to where Asgard is. And they're kind of an expeditionary force of sorts. And so once they arrive, right, they're on the fringes of Asgard space, that Loki says, behold our enemy, the realm of Asgard. And the woman says, it is strange, mistress, right? The legend spoke of Asgard as a golden realm for all its villainy, but this world seems a ruin, as dark and overgrown as a forgotten tomb. And of course, that's where Loki's just kind of like, naturally, Asgardians are far too cheap to pay for any kind of landscaping. And he says, now hush, right? I have to cast the spell of entry and find the weakest point in Odin's defenses. And he says, while I'm doing that, attention, angelic fleet, this is your mistress of strategy speaking, right? And he's like, in a moment, we will move forward with the full might of our invasion force to destroy Asgard forever. We will give them no warning. We will massacre them in their sleep, including the children, especially the children, small children and babies. And I want to stress that, right? Baby murder will happen at almost tedious length. So if anyone doesn't want to slaughter tiny babies in their sleep, you can back out. No blame attached. In fact, I'll pay you. Right? Is anybody willing to back out? And like, nobody is. And so Loki's like, all right, I can't say I didn't try. And he's like, there. And so they all go flying into Asgard, and they crash literally on a force field, right? He destroys the entire fleet in one fell swoop. In fact, he has them destroy themselves. And he just tells this woman, right, this soldier who's there with him, I told you, the Asgardians no longer live in Asgard. Odin sealed the Golden Realm off. It was a little less invisible than yours, but no less impregnable. And he says, well, I mean, until I threw a few billion megatons of exploding warships at it, now it's wide open. And that's where she's like, the invasion fleet is gone. It's destroyed. Why would you ever do that? And Loki's like, because I'm a traitor, silly, right? Not the sharpest sword in the armory, are we? And he says, if it's any consolation, I'm sure the Queen has less gullible invasion forces. And honestly, I think she'd pawn me off with a thicko squadron, right? Just a bunch of dum-dums. And so she goes to attack, and Loki just kills her. Now, here's the cool thing, right? Thor, as you guys always know, when it comes to these stories, he gets his moment. Thor gets his moment, right? Whenever you have Thor chained up, he always gets his moment, right? Here's the thing. while Loki was doing his whole thing with the invasion force, which the queen has no idea that it's happening, that she addresses Thor and she says, "No scream yet, Odin's son." Well, no matter, right? The scream will come. We have so much to give you after all. So much you are owed. The flux is open once more. Our armies are abroad in all their majesty. When they destroy Asgard, the other realms will fall gratefully in line. And if they don't, we'll conquer them in turn. And then we will return to Midgard, once more venerated as its protectors and rulers. And she says, "Thanks to your foolishness, how does that feel? We believe in a fair exchange, son of nothing. Heaven is built on it. So, what would you like now? An easy death, perhaps? You never know. I may allow it, if you say please." And the response of Thor, right? "My sister, the sister you took from me." And she tells Thor, like, "Your sister's dead," right? And the response of Thor, "Then you have a problem, O great queen, because unless I see her now, alive and well, I will bring your palace down upon your head." And the queen asks, "How?" Right? Like, how are you going to manage that? Your hammer is as secure as you are. Your ally fights for our cause. We even have your goats. What can you possibly do? And the response of Thor, "You will find out." And so she says, like, "Do not bluff, son of nothing. It is a most aggravating trait, and I would so hate to lose my good humor." And Thor just says, "Then I ask a question of my own, my lady. In this place, in this realm, where are the clouds?" And her response is almost kind of flabbergasted, like, "Clouds? Like, oh, clouds, yeah, yeah, the white blemishes in Earth's sky. The Midgardians rely on them to water crops." And she says, "Foolish Thor, you stand in heaven now, where all is beauty. We brook no imperfections here. In heaven, there is not a cloud in the sky." And this woman just comes running in, and she's like, "The stars, right? The stars are gone. Great queen, blocked out." And the queen's like, "What are you talking about?" She says, "Great masses of gray and black fill the sky, weeping tears upon us." And this is when the queen learns Thor is not the guy to dick with, because Thor just says, "It has been long eons since your people knew other realms, my lady. Generations have passed. Are there any in your heaven, like, who have even seen a storm? You know wealth, queen of angels. You know power. But I fear you know little of thunder. And now you have made the master of storms your prisoner. And I have called my great servant to me while you played your games. And though it took time for it to cross the span of realms and meet you, the storm is here." And lightning just crashes down on the entirety of the palace and just obliterates the place. And so, like, once the queen recovers, Thor's just standing there as pissed off as he's ever been. And he's like, "My lady, as I remember, in between your tortures, you said my hammer was as secure as I," and calls it back to himself. And he's like, "And it seems it is so. Now, let us discuss my sister." And so what ends up happening is you switch back to Loki when he gets into Asgard, now that the force field has been taken down by all those angels. And when Loki gets in there, he sees two people who are playing a game, one of which is Cole, the other is Odin. And literally Loki fills him in on everything that's been going on. And so in response to this, Odin's just like, "Then it's time for me to act. It is time for me to step in and to finally reveal all," which is kind of what the queen does for Thor, because she says, "Fine, if you want the tale of your sister, I will give you the tale of your sister, and I will give you the whole tale," which is the other side of what happened after the girl was supposedly killed by the queen, that the baby was brought back to heaven, and in that moment just handed over for somebody to throw away in what was basically an incinerator. Not only that, there's actually an argument that breaks out between the queen and one of her generals, when the general kind of states that the queen's actions here will forever spoil their ability to have any measure of peace with Asgard. But the stance of the queen is peace was never a possibility anyway, so who cares what I did? But because this general had the courage to defy the queen strips her of everything, right? Her marks of status will be removed, her assets stripped and confiscated, and she will end her days as the lowest beggar in our realm. And all who spit on her as they pass will know what becomes of those who suffer an Asgardian to live. But the bigger point of all of this is that the baby wasn't dead. the baby was alive, but the queen doesn't know that. And so as far as the queen's concerned, the kid was thrown in an incinerator. And that's what she tells Thor, right? Like, your sister is literally reduced to atoms. The end. There's nothing more. And that's where Thor's like, then I will kill you where you stand. And Angela jumps in yet again, right? So Angela and Thor are fighting a second time, right? And she's like, you dare threaten our queen to lay your hand to any of us? On your knees, son of nothing. You fell to me before, Odin's son. I held your life at my blade's edge, and this time will be no mercy. And Thor's like, you know what? That's fair. But let's correct something here, right? In that you speak true. Before, you faced an exhausted warrior in the wake of a battle he had no heart for. Now you face the god of thunder with the storm about him to the death. Best of luck to you. Like, so let's see what you got. And at that point, the fight is flipped on the other side because Thor calls down the lightning, right? He's like, sure, you're faster than me, but are you quicker than lightning? And like, that subdues Angela, and he's about to deal this killing blow. And so he says, now, demoness, now I will crack your devil's skull like an egg in my sister's name. And he's on the verge of doing it, right? But then Odin shows up, and Odin is just like, stop, right? Let the conflict end. And everyone just stops fighting in his presence. They're all kind of taken aback by the fact that he's here. But like the whole thing stops, right? He says to war, I feel kin's blood sing in my heart. Be afeared, angels of heaven, for this day Odin stands with his daughter. And that's where the queen realizes Angela, who has been a part of the angels all this time, who's been the strongest member of the angels all this time, is a member of her sworn enemy. The baby survived. The queen didn't know, and none of the other angels knew. So all of it comes out. And even Thor's flabbergasted by this because he didn't know Angela was his sister. And so that's where Odin is just like, bow, right? Bow your knee to your own kin, to your sister. And even Angela refuses to believe that it's true, right? She's like, there's no possible way it can be true. But the response of Odin, it is. I know my children and I know you. And in your heart's blood, in the soul your parents gave you, I know that you know me. And Angela has to accept the fact that it's true. It explains why, despite being quote unquote an angel of heaven, she has no wings, right? Why she's stronger and faster and more capable than all the other angels of heaven are. She's an Asgardian. And so that's where all the other angels start to turn on her. And the queen rebukes her, right? The queen says she was his daughter all along. And unfortunately, my fellow angels, we owe her a debt. So in view of your service to us, Aldrich Odinspawn, you may keep your life. You have my word as queen. No angel will harm you. No true angel could bear to look at you. Be gone. You are cast from this realm forever. And so now she has no home because she can't go back home. And when Odin approaches her and is like, you know, you are one of mine, she rebukes him, right? She has no place to really go. And initially she takes off. Thor goes to try to like grab her and understand and talk sense into her, but Odin is just like, no, right? Like, we cannot force her to stand by us, and I will not fight against her. Now, here's the crazy thing about this, right? Odin says, we could make war here in the angel city. We could sunder stone from stone and bone from bone, begin a red slaughter to paint the stars themselves with a foul offal of heaven. But my foolish pride has cost me my daughter once. I will not lose her to it again. So literally, he's just like, we could kill everybody here. We could start a war and slaughter every angel. I alone could do it. And there's no way that they would be able to stop me. But if I did, I would lose my daughter. So literally, it's just kind of telling all the angels, it's by the grace of my love for my daughter that you all continue to breathe another day. And so Loki goes and talks to her for a moment. And they kind of come to an understanding, right? Where she says, I have lost everything as you knew I would from the moment we met. Tell me, Loki, how much of this was your strategy? And the response of Loki, that would be telling, right? But you're right. You have lost much. To stand alone against the fates, to define yourself on your own terms, it is a hard path and one few would choose if they had the choice. And so Loki's just like, I have a couch if you ever want to crash on it. So the question you have to ask here is like, what becomes of Angela in Marvel Comics? What comes next? Well, she travels to Hell, overthrows Hela, and takes over the realm of Hell, and Hela is forced to flee and ask Mephisto for help. So yeah, her story gets really dope. really dope after this, right? It's literally Angela, Queen of Hell. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. A pretty chunky one, but a pretty dope one nonetheless. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.